See. All right, and good morning, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. As mentioned, my name is John Youboty Jr. I spent some time in professional athletics, business, real estate, and now coaching. Along that path, I've also, gone through some very formative transitions, serious injuries, family members passing away, things of that nature, from high school sports, to college football, to the NFL, and then into the business world and entrepreneurship. Different worlds, yet the same truths keep showing up. Today, I want to share that truth with you, not as motivation, but as a blueprint, a formula per se that governs performance, growth, and longevity in every environment. And that truth is discipline. Discipline is something I caught on to the blessing that it is late, due to talent, or just natural proclivities, a little bit insights. Me and all my siblings, we were gifted to play, at the very least, the college level on full ride scholarships. My older brother played in NFL for 7 years. His career was cut short due to injury, as well as mine. I stuck around for the Denver Broncos for 2.5 years. And discipline, as I mentioned, is something that caught late to me towards the middle to tail ends of my college career, when I start to see what that formula and the magic that it truly can be. Ultimate discipline becomes one of life's truest gems once you hone into it. You know why does not allow me to. 1 second. All right, cool. Okay. Most people think discipline is a punishment, something enforced by coaches, parents, authority figures, something you tolerate until one day you finally feel free of it. As shared in adolescence, I used to think that too. But as my path continued through different levels of competition, responsibility, I began to see discipline very differently. Discipline isn't a restriction, discipline is a freedom, because discipline removes chaos. It removes blockage. It gives structure to your energy. And when structure exists, your focus sharpens, confidence stabilizes, and performance become repeatable. The most disciplined people I've ever been around, they don't feel controlled. They don't feel restricted by it. It's not a hindrance of theirs. I always feel that they have a certain grounded temperament to them. You can sense the clarity around them. They always seem poised and at ease. You guys are still being able to see my slides, right? Discipline also changes as the stake rises. In high school, discipline was loud. There's coaches holding your hand. I remember discipline being so embodied into our preparation, that it was more concentrated than actual schematics or the X and O's. There's curfews, attendance, consequences. Someone's always watching, someone's always correcting. Discipline felt external as an outward entity that you're getting familiarized with. Something being applied to you. In college, it gets a little bit quieter. You enter into adulthood, the hand holding reduces significantly. No one is hovering over you. Excuse me, take a sip of water. No one is hovering over your sleep. No one's forcing preparation. You're being gradually prepared for what truly lies ahead. Talent may keep you in the room, but ultimately discipline decides who earns trust. And then you get to the professional level, that shift completes in total. There's no disciplined speeches at all. It's essentially you're a self-entity that pushes forward based off of your self-discipline, your self-arrangement. If you're not staying up to par, you're going to be gone. Of course, there's a slight 1%. If you're the number one overall draft pick, something of that nature, you might have some catering slightly more, but even there, the shift still happens. And at that highest level, discipline stops being managed. It becomes your identity. Click the next slide. Here's a critical reframe that I utilize and I utilize with my clients. Pressure doesn't build discipline. Pressure reveals it. It's a simple concept, of course, but think about it as a fire alarm. It doesn't create the fire. It exposes ones. Pressure works that same way. When the moment gets big, when the stress shows up, when things don't go according to plan, you don't rise to the occasion. You rise to your preparation, those fundamentals that you put into play. You fall back on what you've trained. Another way to think about it is pressure removes the mask. Who you are under pressure is who you rehearse to be in private. It's your truest and purest sense. And that's why in the sports world, obviously, which is relatable to today, the great players, the ones that we remember, the ones that are heralded, all their greatest and finest moment are on the big pressure stages, whether it's the playoffs, the season's on the line. And essentially life is the same way. Um, the beauty of sports is those pressure moments give you the highest assessing of what a player is truly made of. That's why pressure isn't the enemy of discipline. It's the actual feedback of it. This law doesn't live only in sports. It applies to business, to relationships, to life. Different environments is the same, but it's the same operation system. Consistency compounds everywhere. Preparation matters in every aspect and components of life. Structure produces results everywhere. Sports isn't separate from life. Sports is training for life. The habits you build throughout the process and every level from middle school to high school and beyond, those stick with you and they're transferable to any components and aspect of life moving forward. Showing up tired, staying focused, honoring commitments, they don't disappear when that jersey come off. They all transfer. They're always in your mental Rolodex for you to tap into whenever they're needed for the different vicissitudes of life, which is inevitable. No matter what walk of life you come from, whatever your family history is, the proximity that you're in, it's inevitable that you're going to have some triumph that you're going to have to overcome. And all of these different fundamentals that you build throughout your sports background can serve as a pillar, as you're building your family, as you're starting a business, as becoming part of the ecosystem of a corporate environment, things of that nature is the same, mental fortitude and discipline that drives you forward. So next, I wanted to break down the four different types of disciplines. Over time, I feel, discipline reveals itself in four core dimensions. First, there's the structural discipline, your routines, your systems, how your environment is designed. And the beauty of this is, this can be mapped out and shifted and adjusted with proper intent to fit your targeted goals, your pathways, and things of that nature. Second, there's cognitive discipline, how you think, how you talk to yourself under pressure. I don't know if you guys follow current events. If you saw, I believe yesterday with Naomi, when she was playing tennis, she got in trouble because she kept talking to herself, kept saying, come on, come on. It's that self-talk that kind of gives you that cognitive discipline. And I know her opponent was complaining about that. But what you focus on when things tighten, some of this is innate, but with proper awareness and attention, it can be molded. Third, there's emotional discipline, your ability to regulate, to respond instead of react, to stay composed when emotions want to control you. Once again, different people have different emotional temperaments and proclivities, but with attention and awareness, I believe this is something you can hone in on and progress forward with intent and time and discipline. Fourth, there's identity, you know. I believe this is the deepest layer. And when is you saying to yourself, this is who I am. These are my standards. No one has to remind me, it's come from within, which is the greatest self-regulation that there can be. A speech that I commonly give is self-mastery, which is life's northern star. It what guides you through the different changes of the seasons in life that happens. To me, this is the most important of them all. It serves as a guide to shift all things. What you align your inner identity dictates your habits. And all as you rise, fear of these are going to be managed, and they must be owned from within. And then comes the moment that inevitable moment as athletes, to where that sport environment is no longer there. Whether you make it to the pros, you play 10 years, 1 year, you make it to college, is an inevitable journey that we're going to eventually find ourselves in, where you have to be a self-starter in some sense, in some capacity. It comes a moment every athlete faces. Structure disappear. There's no season. There's no whistle. There's no coach. I've experienced this personally during my transition out of professional sports, and I've seen it with former teammates, and with athletes I now work with. It's a common struggle, and I'm sure everybody here is familiar with that common story of athletes overly identifying with their sport, and not really seeing themselves in any capacity beyond that. And when that moment happens where it's poof, it's gone, there can be a struggle if you don't have the mental fortitude, if you don't have that, if you rested all your laurels on that given sport. So, the routine vanishes overnight, and without structure, even talented people can drift. It's not about laziness, it's about sudden absence of enforcement. This is why discipline always tells the truth. And this all led me to the work I do now, as ICF certified executive and personal performance coach. If you're not familiar with ICF, it's the International Coaching Federation, which is essentially the preeminent and most recognizable coaching entity globally. It's a very comprehensive process to get that certification through there. I work with athletes, executives, entrepreneurs, different titles, different lives, but I see the same patterns. They don't lack ambition, they don't lack intelligence. What's missing is structure. And when discipline structure is reinforced, people don't feel limited. They regain clarity, confidence stabilizes, momentum returns. Discipline doesn't restrict people, per se, it restores them. And it goes through any phase, any walk of life. The same thing that can be applied. There's a paradox in it all. Whether it's calling family members to establish relationships, something as simple as your stretching routine at home to keep your body feeling mobile. Um, Put in extra hours before your presentation at work. It all feels like a restriction. Oh, I'm keeping myself confined to sticking to these routines. But the paradox in there that it actually frees you. Uh, writing down to, I'm going to make 2 calls this week to a family member or a close friend, somebody in my nexus. Once you see that compound effect over time, it has that reverse effect to where, discipline isn't something that's restricting me. It's actually creating the freedom in my life. It's actually creating the life of value, the relationships that I want to build. My health is improving, things of that nature. So, here's another powerful part, a powerful part of discipline. Discipline is a keystone habit. When discipline is strong, energy improves, relationships stabilize, as mentioned. Mental health becomes more manageable. When discipline slips, everything seems to feel heavier. One habit quietly governs multiple facets and aspects of your life. Discipline doesn't solve everything, but it makes everything solvable. There's nothing that can be sustained long term without discipline. This is why discipline is like a spine. You don't see it, but it holds everything upright. In my coaching sessions, it's something I overly harp on in regards to, discipline being the spine of your life, discipline being the spine of your business, discipline being the spine of your family. Without discipline, nothing can move forward. In coaching sessions, we don't chase motivation. We rebuild that spine per se, because without structure, nothing stands for long. With it, movement becomes possible. Discipline ultimately, as I keep refurbing on here, isn't a cage. It's the support that allows freedom in your life. So as you move forward in sports, school, and life, just remember this: discipline isn't something you outgrow. It's something you internalize. And when no one is enforcing your structure anymore, that's when your future quietly shows up, and that's when your discipline comes more at play. So Thank you for your time here today and attention. I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. I did leave a decent sizable time here on the back end of it. If there's any Q&A or anything of that nature. And thank you for having me.
Anyone has any questions? Well, I'll go.
All
John,
right.
how did your what was your personal journey like making that transition from making it to the pros and then like having to decide, were you constantly thinking about what you would do? Were you working on that while you were pursuing your
Uh,
sport, or it came after?
in a sense, as mentioned, my older brother played in the NFL, so I was able to have, that foresight of how short it is. In the locker room, everybody jokes that the NFL stands for not for long. So I was able to see him abruptly, something that he's been engulfed in his whole life. He was a little bit more pronounced and sought after recruit than I was coming up. He was a five-star recruit, went to Ohio State, which is as big as a program that there is in the nation up there with Alabama and the Georgias of the world. So I'd see how much he dedicated to that journey and that path. To see it end abruptly for him, being the younger brother, six years younger, I was able to kind of put in my mind, this is not something to rest your full laurels in a given moment. And even with that train of thought, it's still hard. It's much easier said than done. So in a sense, I always had the back thought of this in a given moment, but at the same time, you have to be able to get to that level, you have to lose yourself within that pursuit. So when it ended, for me, it wasn't a clear-cut end. I tore my Achilles. I always envisioned that I'll come back from it and move forward with my career, but the explosion wasn't there. Real estate was something I always had indirect interest in that time during my rehab. I kind of used it as a moment. I kind of just told myself I'm going to find a silver lining in this moment to kind of reinvent myself or just pick up a different habit. I started reading, got deep into reading. I think the first book I read was like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is essentially the Bible of self-help books. And that just took me down a journey of reading and reading, reading. And I guess the fun thing about it is while I was in college, I was not a reader at all, or even in high school, I was not a reader. It took for me to get done with formal education to finally start to educating myself. So I say that it sounds as if it was just a smooth, quick transition getting into it, but by no means was it. There was self-doubt, wondering what I'm going to do with myself. And luckily, I had to hone into those principles I mentioned here that you learn in the sports world to kind of push me forward.
I have a question, and I do like the full scope that you described and what you do. I think it's a valuable asset into the sports world. So, as being a former athlete and things like that, what would you say is your biggest strength or takeaway from just being involved in sports that helped direct your career path on this side? And it's in terms of you were giving this information to a youth audience.
Yeah, so no, I feel like I can talk about that for the next 10 hours. Literally every single thing that you learn, and it's something now that I'm starting to have kids and stuff, I don't care if they're not good at sports. I want them to play sports just for the fundamentals and the structure that it teaches. As I mentioned, mental fortitudes. There's a lot of parallels to sports that's going to come with life. As I mentioned earlier, you speak to anybody that has lived long enough, they're going to tell you the ups and downs that comes with it, whether it's on the personal side, the financial side, family side, health wise, you're going to get hit in the mouth by life no matter what. And that's what happens in sports, whether it's your starting quarterback getting injured or you breaking your leg and then having to find ways to recalibrate yourself to be able to push through that is inevitable. And the discipline and structure, seeing incremental improvements, whether it's in the weight room, your fitness journey, and that's the same thing that's applicable to your business, your outreaches. If you're in sales, getting your pitch and your cadence down, if whatever vocation you find yourself in, there's going to be incremental improvements. There's going to be the nuances of that given role that has to be enhanced, just like a basketball player learning the different techniques. And the beautiful thing about sports, they teach you the minor details and the impact that it has. If you just take 6-inch step, the difference between taking a shorter step, the angle that it's creating, and all that factors and tie into your business as well. Just today, the preparation I did, even though the speech was 15 minutes, I probably dedicated 4 to 5 days of full-fledged, preparation getting here today. And you learn that from sports. You practice weeks and weeks and weeks to go play a game that lasts 40 minutes. So uh
That's the big part right there. I like that. The practice and preparation. I think that
the the camaraderie, working with your colleagues, being able to work with other people from other walks of life, uh, being able to take instruction, being able to take tough instruction. Obviously, in the sports world, sometimes the delivery isn't always the most softest landing, but you have to kind of, well, the good players, kind of try to take the message from what's being said. And is this person saying it from malevolent or being a nasty delivery, or is there's a underlying message and tone there that I can utilize to improve myself, which is going to improve my situation and create more outlets and opportunities for me as well. So we can go on and on and on. There's so many parallels. Is
thank
Yeah,
you.
yes, indeed. All righty.
Yeah,
Well,
so no more questions. Oh, how can people get in touch with you?
yes,
Um,
indeed. The easiest way, I'm most active on LinkedIn. You can just search my name, John Youboty Jr. I also have a Supreme Coaching Group page, which is my business. We do personal performance coaching, executive coaching, and life coaching as well. A good portion of my book of business right now are former athletes that are transitioning into the real world. As we mentioned, this is a common pain point or a common hurdle or obstacle for youth, even at the professional level. People to be able to perform, it's kind of like a actor. You have to lose yourself within that role. You're not going to make it to the top level unless you can't be pursuing real estate and pursuing journalism and then still aiming to become a high level athlete.
right.
It's possible, but it's not highly probable. So once you have to lose yourself in that role, and then once it's gone, your colleagues and your competitors, they've been pursuing what you're now in chase of. And sometimes that's hard to start from ground zero, especially when you're used to performing so well at what it is you were doing previously. So, but yeah, you can follow my Supreme Coaching Group on LinkedIn. And we're also making efforts now to start pushing on other social media platforms as well. So we started Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and things of that nature. But LinkedIn is where you can mostly find me. And then also the website is supreme-coaching.com. You can book a discovery call for any youth athletes or anybody that's trying to enhance their self, their output, and everything is in line. The framework and guidelines are all aligned with the ICF, as I mentioned earlier. We do a lot of emotional intelligence panels. We do a Wonderlic test, which is what the NFL do to get a sense of how people learn the best way that they go about things mentally and things of that nature. So there's a lot of self-assessment to just kind of give you that awareness to be able to function at your higher self, and also give you further understanding as to what path may align better with your natural proclivities as well. So